Hi, I'm Eric Johnson, CTO. This is Monday, August 23rd, and doing an AMA here at GitLab. I don't see anything in the doc, so if someone wants to, feel free to shout out their first question. We can just verbalize it.
Hey, Eric, this is Mark Kriz. I'll ask the first question and then I'll put it into the Google Doc. So in our plan and manage stages, customers are starting to use GitLab more and more for project planning, and they're comparing us to products like IBM Doors. As the CTO, what features do you think we need to add to the product to make it a more legitimate competitor to a planning package like Doors?
Yeah, I don't know anything about IBM Doors, so I can't do a diff there. And for the manage team in particular, I know they're working almost exclusively on tightening up security at the moment, so there isn't a lot of velocity coming there. But plan is broader than that. I'd like to see us use more of our plan stuff internally. So I know there's a series of issues that Kristen, the PM, and Christy, our VP of UX, have identified, mostly around kind of entity relationships to allow things to work a little bit better for our own internal usage. And then I think we can use more of plan up to and including the portfolio management stuff. And I'd eventually love to see a long-term Gantt chart, hydrated with our major initiatives like SaaS first and a lot of the scalability work that we're doing over time, and then progress against each one of those things, kind of the 40,000 foot view. So kind of as an executive stakeholder, I feel like we sometimes have to build those ourselves if we want them, those views in spreadsheets and whatnot. And I think the goal should be that we're using our own app and we're using those feature sets.
Okay, great, thanks.
How's her job?
Anyone want to go next?
Here, I'll ask one since no one else is. We've had a lot of we've had a lot of talk about engineering allocations, and I think by and large developers know how that impacts them, but as well as I do, there are a lot of other departments inside of engineering. So how are you seeing the impact for other teams like UX?
Yeah, to step back a moment, what engineering allocation is we've got documented our handbook for specific teams, percentages of any given release where the engineering manager or engineering management is going to prioritize what we do, mostly for the sake of reliability. That's the big one. Because we've got some debt to pay off, some of those percentages have been dialed up quite high. And so what that means is the back-end engineer persona are working almost exclusively in the short term on availability work. And then it begs your question, which is we've got front-end folks, UX and PM. Those are, I think, the three other personas that, if we're not very deliberate, might be kind of left out in the cold. And of course, we don't want anyone to be idle. And luckily for us, there's plenty of stuff to do. So I know you and Anoop have been working on this. So we've got a component library called Pajamas, and there's a bunch of unconverted UI components that front end could work on. There's a whole collection of UX debt issues that could be executed. There's a lot of forward-looking research that could be done, and of course the PMs, which is not my area, it's Scott and Anoop's area, have a bunch of forward-looking work that they do. Could be competitive analysis or proofs of concepts or research, collaborating with UX research, other sorts of things. So I encourage every leader in that area to just take a look at the next few releases and make sure that they're being planful and setting people's expectations. And I think there's plenty to do. No one's at risk of being idle. Who's next?
Sure, Eric, this is probably maybe an old hat question at this point, but we've kind of gone through several phases of pandemic life at this point. And I think, especially in the US, we're seeing sort of maybe additional fatigue now as things get worse instead of better. Curious how how you're planning for that at the high level, or sort of, maybe the pandemic is a different shape now where it's not an isolated sort of like time box crisis, but more a long-term adjustment. And I'm curious if you have thoughts or just sort of how you're thinking about that and how it impacts the business.
Yeah. And I think it's natural to take your kind of local view, like for us, the US view. And so there's complexity, even how it's going within my own country. But we're such a global company, we got to be mindful that there's other folks. We're talking in the US about like what percentage of people are choosing to get vaccinated. And meanwhile, we've got many team members in countries that don't have zero access to vaccine, let alone choice for that. So I think we need to be mindful when we make global decisions, especially about travel and things like that. And obviously we didn't do a employee conference this year. And that was one of the big inputs into it. When we're local to the US, I mean, my wife and I have been vaccinated since I think it was late April, but we've got small children. And so it's kind of the lowest common denominator within our family. We really haven't been able to open up much at all. We're pretty confident in the technology. So we actually got our kids in one of the trials. So, medical experimentation, which is tough to do, but, they've given this thing to 1 billion people. My wife and I got it. We're not particularly, they've been doing mRNA in small scale for 20 years. So we're not worried something bad's going to happen. So our youngest, she's almost 2. She got 2 shots of something. Hopefully it's not saline. We should find out the moment they apply for emergency youth authorization. And then, because now they have a family relationship with us, because they want to work with families, because you have to drive in, you have to fill out journals and stuff like that. Like some people aren't necessarily reliable in the trial, so they gave us priority for our older 2 kids, 4 and 6, and our oldest is getting her shot of something on Friday. So, but then we still have our 4-year-old. So we're still being very conservative. We went to the beach yesterday, but we're 20 yards away from the nearest person. And we're still saying we're not playing with neighborhood kids, and we're still saying local to the house and whatnot. So still pretty restrictive. And then we're just watching the cases and stuff like that. So that's kind of how my local situation is. And obviously people have different situations, different risk tolerances and stuff. But that's the sort of effects and choices we're making over here. Lauren, you got number 4?
Yeah, I believe you have a degree in psychology. Is that correct? And if so, how has that played into an engineering career?
Yeah, so it's not not me I've got the philosophy degree, so even less connected to engineering. My wife's got the psychology degree. She's got 3 of them. She's a PhD. So in my office hours, we always talk about psychology, and I've been begging for the opportunity to kind of pull her into one of those because she studies psychopaths and stuff, and it's really interesting. Hopefully not applicable at work, but a lot of people find that interesting. So yeah, I have a philosophy degree, liberal arts degree. I started college electrical engineering, so I was going the technical route, and it just ended up being more abstract math on the chalkboard rather than like physical robotics and stuff that I wanted to do. So I got frustrated, and I went to my advisor's office, and my needle kind of went to the other end of the spectrum, philosophy, but programming and computer science was another interest, and I almost ended up there. And luckily, I was programming as a hobbyist kind of along the whole way. So it certainly would have been, given what I do now, it certainly would have been a shorter, less risky route to just get the comp sci degree and go into tech, as I ended up doing anyway. But philosophy, it taught me how to think, made me generally well-read. And I think if you look at like engineering management at Silicon Valley style venture funded companies, you probably find an overrepresentation of liberal arts degrees like that, like history, English, philosophy, a handful of others in engineering management, like VPs of engineering and CTOs and whatnot. I meet a surprisingly, not a lot, but like more than you'd certainly expect. So I think there's something to it, and I don't know exactly what that is, but there's obviously any management responsibility deals with people. There's certainly a lot of communication that goes along with being an executive. So I think those fields of study tend to lend themselves to management in general. And luckily, I happen to have gotten into tech, and I think it's still true today, where you don't necessarily need a credential. You can just if you can do the job, you can get the job, which is good. And I think it's because most tech companies are fairly entrepreneurial. I hope it stays that way, but most fields stabilize over time, or eventually you need the specific degree to go get the entry level job and go up from there. But I don't see tech necessarily stabilizing or slowing down for a long time. So, and I think that's a good thing. And obviously, there's a lot of things we do at GitLab, like the URG mentorship program and other things where we're trying to bring relatively highly compensated tech jobs to places like sub-Saharan Africa and whatnot. And I think that's a good thing. The tech industry can hopefully, give people a rewarding career, in some cases lift them out of poverty, build a middle class in places that don't have it. So we're trying to do our part to follow through on some of those things. And me not going in the kind of, straight and narrow route always provides a little bit of extra push to do things like that. Cause I was given some chances by some generous people, and I want to pay that forward, pay it back. Pay it forward, I think is the right direction, right vector. But thanks for asking.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's really exciting to hear. I've always been interested in philosophy and thinking about going back to school and figuring out what I would go into. So super enlightening. Thank you.
Sure. Anyone got a fifth question?
I'll ask another one, which
Sure.
is, are there things that you miss being an executive? Like, you're obviously very busy, lots of meetings, lots of, as you mentioned, communication and people work, but are there things that you technically miss, or things that you don't get to spend time doing that you wish you could do?
Yeah, I mean, mostly what you'd expect, like the technical, the engineering work. I'll say, like, having been in this role across several companies now, I always would just like program personal projects on the side, and that kept me somewhat sharp, although not as sharp as people that do it 24/7, like Stan and Camille and Jigorsh and all them. But like having young kids really wiped the hobbyist stuff off my calendar for the time being. So, but as they get older, it's a little bit more possible to do things like read books and, learn a new programming language and whatnot. So I know that stuff will come back. But it is it's a good thing to think about. If you're going to engineering management, I encourage people to be deliberate about like when they can take advantage of opportunities to check back in and refresh their technical skills. And the last time I really did that in a meaningful way was 2 companies ago. I was a senior director, and the company was based on the East Coast, and I moved out to San Francisco and was in a satellite office, and took that opportunity to kind of downscale my responsibilities of a very small team. And I took the opportunity to be maintainer of a couple apps and a couple websites, and was on call and the main programmer. And this was like 2011, 2012. So kind of Node was new in the scene. So I learned server-side JavaScript, and that was a lot of fun. And I still reference some things from those time when I get in technical conversations. And then the rest is just kind of like reading, which is not the same as reading about programming. Is pales in comparison to actually doing it in terms of how it informs the decisions you make. So as I look ahead in my career, I always wonder like when the next time will be that I would get the chance to do that. And who knows what it might be, Rust or something that hasn't been invented yet, or if it'll just be the hobbyist stuff that comes back online when the kids get a little bit older and they're all in school and they're more independent and whatnot.
I think I have the next one here. Sorry, I was a little bit late, so I just added it. But
No worries.
you always seem so calm and collected in meetings. This is not me flattering you because you're my upstream VP, but you really do, and you're really good on your feet. And I was just wondering if you had any advice for folks who maybe want to get a little bit better on camera in meetings, presenting themselves or in front of customers, kind of what your advice is when you go into those situations.
Yeah, that's a good question, and thanks. I do try to be calm, cool, and collected. I think there's really no substitute for just practice. So for something like this, shameless plug for my office hours. I basically do an AMA once a week, and it's open to the whole company, but it's on the calendars of everybody in engineering, and it happens either afternoon my time or morning my time, so I can overlap with the APAC folks or the EMEA folks. It's a little bit more conversational than this, but it's pretty similar. And so it's rare that I get a question I haven't literally fielded before in many cases. So I've kind of always thought through, if not a specific answer, like a topic or something like that. And I probably get challenged or caught off guard a little bit more in that setting because it happens so frequently. And then, every once in a while I do an AMA like this, and it's that much easier in comparison. And let's see, advice for people that want to talk to customers and stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I would just say look for opportunities. I mean, it's there's no reason, especially at our style of company, why you can't get started just shadowing meetings. I mean, even it's interesting. Like I didn't do a shadow program, but I talked with Sid a lot, and Sid's got the shadows, and people entering that program versus exiting it just over the span of 2 weeks, they come out saying, gosh, I feel like I know so much about the company now. And I got exposed to so much stuff, and it was really intense, but it was great. And for the most part, there's very little requirement for them to kind of like talk and contribute, but just getting exposed to that stuff seems to increase their knowledge and confidence quite a bit. So that's definitely something you take advantage of. But at a smaller scale, there's no reason why you can ride along with a TAM going into a customer meeting or someone like that, and just start to see how people communicate, what the cadence of those meetings are, and then in my experience, when you do something like that, eventually there's a question asked where nobody knows the answer, and it's like, oh, me, the fly on the wall, actually knows this one. You take that opportunity to chime in, and then that's your sort of foothold into starting to contribute and participate. But also, like at GitLab, one of our secrets is we keep the stakes pretty low for making mistakes and whatnot. So I encourage you not to not feel like you have to kind of hold back or be perfect in those settings. That's a really slow way to learn in the scheme of things. So we try to have an environment where people are comfortable taking those small interpersonal risks. And if you're wrong, no big deal. We'll just find the right answer together and move forward and try again next time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eric.
Sure.
Mine's more of a follow-up to hers. Have you always been this calm and cool, or was this a learned behavior along the way?
Yeah, good question, Sean. I had a mental note to answer that in our question and I forgot. So thanks for bringing that up. So no, I was actually a really anxious little kid. I was the kid who had insomnia, worrying about global warming and stuff like that. Like I was a wreck. And I was like super straight A student, like everything had to be perfect. And I kind of burned myself out. And, I was probably like not even a teenager, and kind of burned myself out in school and stuff like that because I was just holding on too tight. And for me, kind of like learning to step back and like, oh, things aren't a disaster. That was part of the step. I think what I addressed earlier about kind of getting burned out on double E and going into philosophy was kind of part of that journey for me. And so, yeah, I think for those of you that are concerned about this, I'm at least one data point. Like, yes, this can be learned. It's not innate. It's not like you're either one nature or the other. You can choose to adapt if you want.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Anyone got another one? Looks like we're up to number 7 in the doc. Cool. Well, we're coming up on time anyway, so why don't we end it here? But thanks everybody for the good questions and discussions. And as I said, my office hours happen once a week, so feel free to pop in there. And if you forgot something you wanted to ask, that's a good forum. And in some cases, we can go deeper on the answers and have some back and forth on this stuff. Also, my staff meeting is on Wednesdays. That's open to the company as well. So if you're interested in listening in or contributing, just look at my calendar and add yourself, and we'll see you there. So thank you.